Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 13 of Out of Character, the show where your favorite creators drop out of character for an hour to talk with game designer and host Marc Tassin, that'd be me, about their art, their process, and the nerdy stuff that inspires them. From the secrets behind their craft to the ins and outs of the business to the games, shows, and books that they can't get enough of, it's a unique and candid look at the folks who create the stuff that you and I love. Now, comments are open throughout the show on Twitch. And so if you have things that you'd like to share or questions you've got, please make sure to drop those in. We'll do our best to grab some of those as we go along. Now, enough preamble. Allow me to introduce Out of Character's guest for this week, none other than Peter Adkison. Hey, Peter, how's it going?
Great. Thank you for having me on this show, Marc. It's good to see you.
Oh, absolutely. We're thrilled to have you here. This is really great. Now, I think a lot of people know who you are, but for those who don't, let's just pretend for a minute that someone's like, who is this guy? Tell us a little bit about what you've done, what your sort of creative projects have been over the years.
Oh, well, let's see. You probably saw my picture down at the post office or on the milk carton, something like that. Peter Adkison, I probably best known for, I was a founder of Wizards of the Coast and its CEO for 10 years. While I was there, we did Magic the Gathering and more Magic the Gathering and lots more Magic the Gathering. But we also acquired Dungeons and Dragons and Gen Con in the late 90s. And I had the pleasure of being able to steer that ship for a while. And let's see, what else did we brought Pokemon to America. That was a lot of fun. And out of that, with all the deals were done after I left Hasbro, about a year later, I ended up with Gen Con again. And I still own Gen Con to this day with my amazing partners, and very, very thrilled with that. And so that's what I'm best known for. And then I keep busy with things like Gen Con TV, which is we're on.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
I'm self. And I do this thing called Actoroki, which is one of the shows on Gen Con TV, where we film role-playing games, and then I cast actors to act out the story created in the role-playing game, and I edit it into a movie. And that's my life. I have a wonderful wife named Dee, and there we go. Now that's my life.
Yes. Well, that's actually awesome. And that is, I mean, you've done one or two things, a couple of things here or there that people might have heard of. But I do want to talk, you just mentioned, let's just jump into something that isn't the most obvious thing in the world.
Sure.
I'm not going to ask you about Magic or D&D just right now. I want to talk about Actoroki, right? I have a image here I brought up that's sort of one of the promotional shots for Gen Con TV. Tell me a little bit about it. I mean, this is on every week. So what is Actoroki all about?
Yeah, so it's this crazy. Well, when I turned 50, which is about a decade ago, I got this wild hair and decided, I want to go to film school. And ever since then, I've been trying to figure out interesting things I could do with that. Making films. That's kind of my second love, if you will, of making films. And so I love role playing. And so it's always been this thing nagging at me about, like, how can I combine these two things? And so I liked filming RPGs, but of course there's a ton of that on Twitch and YouTube and stuff like that. So how could I do something a little differently? And so it came up with this idea. So what we do is we film an RPG. So the RPG is kind of like a normal RPG session in a way. We do film in a studio now. We were doing this on Zoom not too long ago.
Right.
And then that part is normal, but then it starts to diverge. Immediately, my buddy Steve Connard, who I started Wizards of the Coast with back in 1990, his love now is screenwriting. And so he writes a screenplay adaptation of the RPG, much like, the movie Dune is an adaptation of Frank Herbert's novel.
Right.
This is an adaptation. So some things will change to try and tighten it up and make it a more cohesive story, which, frankly, role-playing games need.
Yeah, well, we all know that. We've been at the table. We know how things go sometimes.
Yeah. So, and then I cast actors. I mean, some of the actors will be already cast because these are often episodes in a series. So the the player characters, if you will, the lead actors,
Yeah.
will be cast for a whole series. And then I like madly scrambled, like, oh, but they went to a bar and met the bartender and had this interesting conversation. Suddenly that's in the script. Well, that means I got to go out and cast an actor to play that character. Usually just a few days notice, 1 week notice if the DM is like going off the rails. And,
Right.
and then, costuming and all that sort of stuff. It comes together really fast. But that's very fun, though. It has a little bit of the feel of a stage production in sort of how harried it can get in so much. And then what I used to call editing hell week, but now I've rebranded it editing heaven week, where I
Nice.
spend a week editing the coverage from the film shoot into a movie. And so from the RPG to the movie is 2 weeks. It's crazy. It's insane.
That's nuts.
It's insane.
But I mean, that's so cool because for all of us who sit around the game table, I mean, the thought of having our game go from being the cool thing we have in our own minds to actually seeing it be just as cool on screen. I mean, that's awesome. That's a really fun and sort of definitely fits into the sort of wish fulfillment that most of us, we gamers, feel, right? When we're playing these games.
I think so. I mean, most of my business career has just been doing the things that I wanted as a gamer, right? So
Yeah.
For me, this is very much like, wow, I would really love to see this. But nobody's doing it, so I'm going to do it. And yeah, there is this fantasy of like how our games come to life in this way, and it's pretty cool. I mean, the videos are not like Hollywood quality. Like, give us a break. These things are made in 2 weeks. So I'm like doing editing sometimes right up to the to an hour before we stream the movie. And like last week, I forgot to clip out there's a section in the middle of the credits.
Well, yeah, when you're on sort of like that rapid fire, but I mean, that's part of what's cool about it too, because it's easy to get hung up on a project on having too much time to work on it, right? And I think that a lot of creative people run into that, where at some point when you've got this undeniable deadline, you have to just go with what you've got, and oftentimes that's plenty good, right? It's good enough.
There's no time to lollygag with Actoroki. I mean, it is like once I'm on my part of the process, I don't DM. At first, I did DM the first series that we did, but DMing, I found DMing on Twitch kind of stressful. Like, it's not. I mean, I've been DMing since 1978, but for some reason, I'm not real comfortable DMing on Twitch. And it's being the DM and being the editor and the director was just like, okay, too much. I can't.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's key too. I mean, to me, going back to sort of why people probably know you is because of your work with Wizards of the Coast, which is where people would have first heard about you and heard about the things you're working on. I think that being able to tell the difference between what you'd like to do and what makes sense to do in order to actually get a product out the door is something that is hard for a lot of folks to learn. And one of the things that we try to do on this show is talk a little bit about things that will help other people who are trying to sort of break their own creative thing out into the world. I mean, you just talked about recognizing that you needed to not do it all. I mean, what sort of advice do you have for people on how to watch for that, or what you do to sort of help yourself to know when it's time?
Yeah, that's a good one. That tug of war never really goes away,
Right.
because if you're a creative person, and then you probably got more creative outlet type projects going on than you want. If then you can possibly do well, I should say. If you're a business, if you got the business interest too, and so you want to do a product but also run the business so that you can maintain control of it, then you're burning right off the bat. You're burning the candle at two ends, and that's pretty tough. So I wanted, when I started Wizards of the Coast, I wanted to be a game designer. I wanted to write RPG supplements. I didn't know Richard Garfield yet. I didn't know he was going to create magic. We were going to be an RPG company, and
right.
Fortunately, I realized pretty quickly that I wasn't really very good at that, and so that helped me let go And
Hmm.
when you meet somebody like Richard Garfield and go, oh, this, yeah, I'm not thinking at that level. I think I better just let him do that.
Well, I think that's an important lesson for anybody working on any project is that recognizing the people who are really good at things and having the humility to say, you're the right person to do this piece. I might have my own ideas. I might love doing it. But at the end of the day, you'd probably be better off being the one who does it. Right. And that helps you to sort of bring that overall vision. But I'm sure that you still had sort of a creative overall vision and involvement in being able to say, look, this is kind of what I'm imagining, and then letting people execute on those ideas.
Yeah, you do. That is what you're supposed to do. And I think that you end up having more vision in some areas than other areas.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I always, I think I always had something of a vision for what sort of games we wanted to make, but you're always you're always steering it, you're always questioning it as well. It's not as perfectly clear as a business Harvard business case might seem to be, right?
Right.
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
oftentimes kind of like sailing through fog,
Uh-huh. Does that ever
There's just
change? Like when you get into new projects and new companies, does that ever change, or is it always like that every step of the way? You're sailing through fog and sort of making it up as you go, it feels like.
Yeah, I think some of that's just in your own head, but I think there's a really interesting balance between the having a vision
Hmm.
and adjusting it as you go. And I think that there's something to be said for recognizing where you're at based on your comfort with the vision, based on
Yeah.
your confidence in the vision, and also like testing it from time to time. And there's also a danger if you're changing the vision too often, which happens a lot in a startup company or early stage company, or even a company like, my Chaldea / Actoroki company has been around 10
Yeah.
years. We've changed a lot because you're always searching for that right combination. And so you try something and this, so you have to be willing to back off something that's not quite working the way you wanted it to. But on the other hand, you don't want to be sort of subject to the whims of change. You want to give it a chance to play out for a while too. So
Yeah.
it's tricky.
So, all right. So I'm asking this just this is something I personally am wondering about is at what point do you look at something and even though you love it, you say, you know what, this thing is not something we should keep pursuing? Are there any sort of like red flags for you when you're like going, there's a difference between being persistent and being stubborn, right? Or
Yeah.
is there not really a difference?
Yeah, I think you got to be honest about looking at the metrics, whether that's
Yeah.
dollars and revenue or views or what have you, and then like, but if it's going slow, but you feel like things are improving, like we've had with Actoroki, I tell you,
Hmm.
it has been slow build, but we've also had a lot of technical issues. And at first, we were
Hmm.
doing everything on Zoom, and then we went into the studio, and then Omicron came, and
Right.
we went back onto Zoom, and then came back, and then we went back in the studio, and we've had a lot of technical challenges. So you kind of like, but nevertheless, our numbers have been going in the right direction, and so that that feels good. Also has this thing like, just get the tech and get my editing skills up to where I can really do a good job with these videos, then it should be even better, right? So but
Right.
it's
Yeah.
it's hard to be honest with yourself about things. And also, why are you doing it? Like with
Hmm.
me right now with Gen Con TV and with Actoroki, it's not
Yeah.
about making money. It's just about doing something that I can be proud of, and like I
Hmm.
talk about and say, this is what I'm doing. And people are like, oh, that old man ain't done yet. He's still doing stuff.
So speaking of Gen Con TV, I'm a little biased because here we are on Gen Con
We
TV.
are.
Obviously, I'm not going to lie, but the reality is that when I first heard about this, I was like, yeah, this should be a thing, right? Because Gen Con is sort of like, this is how it's sort of like the heart of my gaming culture for me. And because I've been going since I was a kid, I've
Thank
been
you.
forever, right? And it's like Gen Con TV, I'm like going, yeah, this makes sense. I should be able to go to one place. I mean, what was sort of the inspiration for you? Like, what was your dream when you went, ooh, you know what this could be, right?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. Well, Gen Con has had a Twitch channel for like 4 years now, right? And it's
Yeah.
done okay with just having like 2 or 3 shows on it every week and kind of being a little bit on autopilot because
Hmm.
while for the last 4 years there was nobody really focused on it who it was like everybody's just kind of, oh, this is this cool thing we're doing over here, and people who are passionate about it, who are really excited about it. But like Derek Gooder, who's really deserves the credit for launching this show and getting it going, this channel, I should say. But he's
Hmm.
got a full-time job running events for Gen Con, and
Right. Right.
when you put the business priorities, running events for Gen Con, I mean, that's where, that's where the money's
Yeah.
at. That's where the business is at. So, um, and it kind of came to a point where Gen Con management was saying, like, for the overall picture of Gen Con, this is a cool thing, but we lose money doing it, and it's really not anybody's job.
Yeah.
So Gen Con said, I think we're just going to stop doing it. And so when David Hobby announced at a board meeting, it's like, whoa, 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 whoa. Wait, this could be, I love this idea. So I stepped in, and David and I immediately, we've always had kind of the same idea for Gen Con TV, which is like, it needs more programming, right?
Hmm.
I don't
Yeah.
know if it still needs more programming. I don't know how much programming is enough programming, but I mean, I'd certainly like to get a really good show on Saturday, and then I'd have a show every day of the week, and that
Hmm.
seems like a good milestone to try and hit. Not quite there yet. So I think the idea of that, and then the content, I said, like, it should be like walking around Gen Con in terms of the type of things you see on Gen Con TV. So you see a lot of people playing games. I'd like to see more exhibitors involved. We have our talk
Yeah.
show, with
Hmm.
you, and we have, I mean, Kathy's been ill lately, but when she's feeling good, we have a miniatures painting show.
Oh yeah.
And so it's I I like it. It was pretty clear. It was pretty easy to articulate what I wanted to do with this channel, is just
Yeah.
add more cool programs and broaden it from just 2 board gaming shows. Oh, and I'm forgetting our flagship show, Table Takes. We have a show that is
Right. Yes.
news and talk. Yeah,
Yeah, and for me, that's part of what appealed to me when I heard about it was this idea that, for many years I ran the Gen Con Writers Symposium, and one
that's
of the
right.
things I loved was having a way to like allow creative people to interact and to speak with folks that could benefit from hearing what they have to say, whether it's about educating them about how they got into the business or the craft that they undertake, or creatives of all types. And that's what I liked about it, was this sort of idea that like, oh, I can do Gen Con all year round, right? I can just bring the
Right.
same people, some of the same types of folks. We've had some amazing people on, and a cool mix of people as well. So yeah, it is a lot like being able to walk around Gen Con and peek into rooms, and
Right.
every day there's different things going on. So that is
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah. Exactly.
And you're
Yeah.
talking about like the
I'm having fun with it. Anyway, sorry. Yeah.
no, I was gonna say you were talking about the exhibitor side of it. Like, tell me a little bit more about, if you whatever you're allowed to. I don't know what's
Yeah.
secret or not
Well,
secret, but what would you like to see? Like, what do you
yeah.
imagine?
Yeah. Well, I'd love to see some of exhibitors who are interested in Twitch programming just do a show. I mean, just play their games. I mean, it'll be. I suppose that risks being very commercial, but hey, you go in the exhibit hall. It's obviously very commercial. So, it would be so. And I'm talking to a couple of exhibitors. I think we'll have an announcement when we come back from the show, for at least a couple of companies to just like do their own show on Twitch. Because the reason I think that would be interesting for them is that I could see a game publisher wanting to have a presence on Twitch, but not wanting to go through the effort of creating a whole channel, because to make a channel work, well, either you got to have some super awesome celebrity type. Okay, well, that would be nice, but you can't just make that happen, right?
Right, right.
Without paying a lot of money to hire one. Or you've got to have multiple good programming options, multiple shows on the channel. And so you see a lot of streamers who are doing Twitch streams, 4, 5, 6 times a week, right?
Yeah.
And so I think that if I can provide a publisher a way to have a presence on a channel like that, still own all their own content, And I expected what they would do would be playing their own games, right? So, playing their games, demoing their games, run tournaments, run audience interactive sorts of events. I suppose, but it's up to their creativity too, I guess.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Oh, that'd be very cool. Yeah, and I like that idea. Is thinking, I guess the only thing that's missing from this are the musicians who we see performing in the hallway. I kind of feel like we need to have a show where once a week we get to hear somebody perform, one of our hallway performers. It'd be fabulous.
Oh my
There's
gosh, that's a good idea.
Yeah,
That's a great
it'd
idea.
be
I'm gonna
awesome.
send them to you.
Okay, good. Thanks for letting me know.
Well, and we don't have much yet with art. Although I'm doing with Actoroki, part of the secret sauce is we have Tanel Lovett is illustrating live during our RPG session. So while we're
Mhm.
playing RPG, she's drawing illustrations live at the table that we're showing on one of the cameras in the Twitch overlays. So that's but I would love to see more done with art.
Yeah, that would be very cool. That'd be very cool. Lots of potential. Well, I'm very excited about it, and I'll be excited to see what happens. And it's continuing on past Gen Con, right? This isn't a short-term thing. It's pushing forward. So,
Yes, yes. We have decided to. Well, I've when I first started doing this in February, I said, "Well, I'm going to try it till Gen Con,
mhm.
see if this, it's like we were talking about earlier, see if things are working right." And
Yeah,
our numbers have really gone up. I mean, people are really happy. Our producers are doing great shows, and it's really like it's almost scary how well it's working. I'm sure there will be a decline after Gen Con because right now there's a lot of eyes on Gen Con because there's a lot of anticipation for the event. And we
mhm.
see this and we've seen this in our numbers for
Yeah.
years, whether it's Gen Con TV or a YouTube channel or just our regular social media type posts. There's a bit of a drop off afterwards, and then it starts to build up again.
I
So
think we all need a break after Gen Con too. Like, just give me a couple of weeks to recover, and then I'll come back around afterward.
yeah, yeah. Exactly. But I think there's also probably this sweet spot opportunity of just like for a few days after Gen Con to kind of catch the tail of Gen Con interest. I don't know if I'm going to have enough energy to, or not, if I'm creative enough to come up with an interesting idea for that.
Yeah, people who want to make Gen Con last just a little bit longer, like hang on to it for a
Yeah.
little bit longer. We always wear our badges, and until we
Yep.
take the badge off, Gen Con's not over. So we actually will wear our badges all the way home. Maybe we have to wear them for a couple days after to watch Gen Con TV and keep it going just a little longer. So,
That's hilarious.
well, all right. So one of the things we do like to talk about is the people who inspire you, the people who are, that help you to get excited about things. And I have a picture that I absolutely have to show.
Okay.
Is this one here,
Oh.
right? This is an
Yeah.
amazing picture. Tell me about it.
Well, that is me on the left. I
Mhm,
know. It looked a lot different. That's a few years back. In the middle is Richard Garfield, the guy that invented Magic the Gathering. And to
mhm.
the right is Gary Gygax, the guy that co-invented Dungeons and Dragons and started Gen Con. So, all my favorite brands.
Right, all in one place.
Yes. So this was at a dinner celebrating D&D um, and during Gen Con. I don't remember the year, but it was the last year that before Gary passed away. And
Mhm,
there was this magical moment too, getting Richard and Gary they were both at my table at this dinner, and they had never met each other, but of course were aware of each other's work, and they were both
yeah,
so gracious. They were both like just sincerely and like telling each other how much they respected the other one and how much they liked whether it was Magic or D&D. Like it was like I get emotional just thinking about it. It's the way we would like to see our heroes act.
right,
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
Yeah,
And so it was a really nice moment, and somebody, you know, captured that photo and was gracious enough to pass it along to me. And yeah, it's a nice memory.
that's really fantastic, and I mean, a lot of us don't get the opportunity. It's part of why I wanted to do this, is that most of us don't get the opportunity to just talk to and hear the people that we look up to creatively and from an inspiration point of view, and, you know, get to hear them talk, get to ask them questions, and, you know I know I'm sure there's always the fan part of it, which is hard to get away from. You always have people you're just like, "Oh my god, I'm just so excited I'm meeting you." But also it's cool when you start to get to meet these folks and start to hear how they think creatively, right? I mean, I'm
Yeah.
sure you had opportunities to learn from the folks that you've met over the
Well,
years.
I've learned a lot from Richard. I think
Mhm.
two of us together, we were both very young when we
Yeah.
started the Magic the Gathering story together. He was always, incredibly brilliant and insightful. And I think he, when we talked about, we went through the typical exercises that growing companies, we're like, what's our vision? What's our culture? What are we about? And Richard said, I want us to have the attitude of a student. Um, the student realizes that they have a lot to learn and
Mhm.
is uh, trying things, and he personified that sort of thing, which is very studious sort of approach to life. And it was really fun sort of trying to figure out the whole trading card game thing together,
Yeah.
you know.
I mean, because you for a large part, I mean, there had been other card games, but you were inventing a lot of this stuff from scratch as you guys are putting it all together and sort of breaking new ground left and right on this. So there must have been a lot of moments where you guys just sat there brainstorming things and going like, this is going to be great. And then it doesn't work at all when you play it and, learning from
Yeah.
each other.
Yeah, there was tons of that. Lots of talking, lots of debating, and not, and of course not just Richard and I, but a lot of very smart guys in that were in R&D and other departments, executives, all throughout the 90s, trying to, banging our heads against this problem of how to make how should a trading card game get made? How should it get marketed? How should it get packaged? How should it get sustained? And so on and so forth. Yeah, fun. I miss it. I do.
Yeah.
There was an intensity about it. Like you could go down to the WotC office at 2 a.m. and there'd be people up working.
Right.
At any
Well, I
time,
mean, it
day or
sounds like a
night.
startup vibe, right? I mean, like an IT startup, it's the same sort of passion and excitement, and you're all working towards this goal. At the same time, it sounds like, something that people sometimes don't realize is that this stuff doesn't just magically happen. There's lots of trial and error. There's lots of work and discussion and debate that goes on with these sorts of things.
A ton. Like we talked, I mean, packaging seems like such a simple thing, but
Yeah,
how to package Magic? We were like, we had no idea. How do you do this? Like what? How should we organize this? We know that we want people to have a bunch of cards and build decks and play these decks against. We understood very very quickly. Richard, hit on the combination of what this game was about and what it would be like to
hmm,
play it, and it never wavered. He had that crystal clear from the beginning. But the implementation was, how do we sell these to customers? Um,
right, exactly.
it was crazy. Uh,
Yeah.
can I talk about Gary for a second?
Oh, please do. Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah. So it's interesting when I didn't know Gary very well until the year that we acquired TSR, which of course
Hmm.
he had been ousted from TSR many years earlier, and it's a
Yeah.
very tragic story. Um, but when I started going out in the process of negotiating the deal and doing the deal and buying the company and eventually relocating it, I was going out to Lake Geneva frequently, like
Hmm.
um, a week on, a week off, that sort of thing. And when you are the dynamic is a little awkward, like buying a company. Like, how much
Right.
should you be hanging out with employees, especially before the deal is done? Probably not too much. And then
Right.
after
Right.
the deal's done, and so the place I could go is I would go over to Gary's house, and we would chat and play war games. I got to know him pretty well during that particular year, and I always, but mainly what we did is we just played games. We never really talked about business much, and I would think about all the crazy stories he would have. Which of course now, fortunately, we got John Peterson telling all those crazy stories
Right.
for us.
Exactly. Yeah.
which is great. I'm glad we finally all get to hear him. But we just, I think what I learned from Gary is just sort of like, it's okay to just really like to play games. And if that's what you want to do when you get together, it's okay. Well, Gary's doing it. Gary, it must be okay.
It's funny because I think it's easy when you're working on projects to forget about the part of actually enjoying the stuff that you like to work on, because you're
Right.
so intensely focused on the process of creating that thing. It's kind of like going, you are going to like play a game once in a while, right?
Right. Right. Exactly.
Well, that's fantastic. And I mean, the thing is, as you said, a lot of those stories have been recorded. They're coming out in different ways. The John Peterson book, which is somewhere right over here on my shelf, I've got, right. I mean, there's lots of this stuff out there, but I think there's probably a lot more value in just sort of seeing how, I mean, from a nerdy analysis, sort of like going like, how does he play games? Like, just has fun playing them, right? Like, you have this image of Gary Gygax being very, focused on the creating of D&D, but he also played it. He played
Oh, yeah.
role-playing games, he played board games.
He was a gamer through and through, he was a minis guy, before,
Uh-huh.
because, role playing obviously didn't exist before, he and David invented it.
Yeah.
What were they doing? They were playing war games. It was a question of like, which category of games were you in? Well, either naval warfare or World War II tank warfare. I mean, those were the categories. Napoleonics.
Right.
I mean, it wasn't. And so maybe the occasional board game. Now and then. So it's yeah.
So let me ask you, how did you start playing D&D? Like, when did you first run into it and start playing?
Well, similar to Dave, except for the designed it part.
Yeah.
Dave and Gary I was a war gamer. I played war games with my dad. More the board war games like Avalon Hill, SPI. Big maps with hex grids and lots of cardboard chits moving around on the map, and
Yeah.
uh,
Panzer, all
yeah,
the old.
yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
Panzer Blitz, Squad
Yes.
Leader. Oh, yeah.
Oh, squad leader, yes.
Third Reich.
Wilderness survival.
Yeah. Yes, I did. I didn't care for it. We put it away. Where are the guns? I don't know. Anyway, God, that sounds horrible.
Wilderness survival, we just were like trying to see who could die the last, right?
Right.
Who died? Who
Yeah.
could stay alive longest? One person got stuck at a cabin in the woods and never got home, and we called that a win. We
Yes.
figured. Anyway, sorry, I'm digressing.
Yeah, no. So I in pursuing wargaming, I became a fan of early Flying Buffalo products. They did play by mail games, specifically a game called Nuclear Destruction. I'll be the first kid on your block to blow up the world. Just joyful themes that run through wargaming. I was such a diehard fan. I got their newsletter every week and everything, and it started talking about Tunnels and Trolls. And my brother introduced me to The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings, and so I kind of ended up at about the same time getting this sudden interest in fantasy. And then I was at a game store in 1978. My mom had given me a little money to go to a game store and buy a game, and I was in the store. And I had a game in my hand, a big SPI game called Atlantic Wall, which is, and on the counter was the blue box D&D set, and this big dragon. And I just on impulse, I knew nothing about Dungeons and Dragons and nothing at all. I just bought it and took it back to school and read it. And I was so lost. I had no freaking idea what the heck was going on with this game. I started DMing it though for some of the other people in the dorm, and still, like, we DM'd several levels of, we ran through this whole dungeon, and I still really didn't get it, like, in terms of this idea of a role-playing game, until that summer when I went back home, because I was living in a boarding school. I was going to school in a boarding school, and I went back home. And I went down to the local hobby shop where they sell model trains. That's where we bought our games in those days. And there was a, opponents wanted sort of bulletin where you could go and find other people to play games with, because there weren't that many people playing games. So it was kind of hard to find them, right? And there was a guy who was running a D&D game So I took down his number and I gave him a call, and he said, "Yeah, sure, come on over and play." I mean, it's so sketchy at some level, but
I
I mean, that's just
know.
how we did it. And so I go to this guy's house, and we sit down at the table, and and roll the character, and the first thing he says, "Okay, you're sitting in a bar, and this old guy comes down out of the mountains. He's like an old mountain man type guy, and he gets up on a table and he starts talking. And here's what he says. He's like, and he rails on about how orcs are infesting the land and the nobility aren't doing anything about it. And just God, you just like cussing and swearing and then the DM says, "Okay, what do you guys do?" I'm like, "Oh, I get it now. I get it now. Oh, wow!" Like
That's
that
awesome.
moment was role playing. Like suddenly, I was engaged in the story, right? And
Right.
we went out and took care of the art problem.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Yeah, that moment of realization where it all sort of comes together, and it's funny because I think that there's fewer and fewer of those surprise moments happening these days because it's become such a part of our sort of mainstream consciousness, right? This
Yeah,
idea of what a role-playing game is. I mean, it's in Stranger Things, for heaven's sake.
yeah.
Everyone kind of gets it at this point. And that is kind of interesting that first discovery back when it was weird and people didn't know what the heck it was and why people were even doing it.
Yeah, it was such a moment, to take everything you thought you knew about games and just turn it upside down,
Yeah.
and that was and there was a similar moment when Richard explained the idea for Magic to me. It
Yeah.
was like, oh wow, my my view of the world has just changed, right? The world is just got a lot cooler because look at there's more joy that can happen now because of what can be
Right.
done in games. That's pretty cool.
That's awesome. So are there any games that you've been playing lately that you feel are pushing the edge of that next sort of breaking? Is there anything that I mean, if it was something that was obvious, we probably all know about it at this point. But is there anything that
Yeah.
like has been especially kind of cool and you're like, that's getting there, right?
Yeah, it's we have an embarrassment of riches now, right? There's nothing.
Right.
I mean, I think there's so many games that we'd have just now there's 100 games that would have just been
Right.
impossible 20, 30 years ago, right? And so the both in RPGs and board games, but it's been kind of these just small little incremental improvements for a long time, not something that just kind of blows you away. I think the more interesting things that have been happening in the last decade or so have been more like connecting people in by being
Yeah.
able to play online, although some of them we're all sick of it by now because that's all the only way we could play during the pandemic, but now we
Right.
all know how to do it.
Yeah.
you know and that's pretty cool, and I think it's cool that there are people now who can make money doing that. I think
Mhm.
that's great. There is I would love to see Mark I would love to see more opportunities for people to make money, make a livelihood, earn a living in this world of tabletop gaming. That's
Yeah.
the sad part of our industry, is that it's hard to make a living at it. There's a lot more people that want to
Yeah.
do it than can do it, and so I'm happy whenever I see sort of a new way of being able to earn a living in our industry, whether it's
Yeah.
of course, being a publisher, or a retailer, or distributor. Those are like classic three back in the day, or a freelancer. But now streaming has brought another avenue for that, which
Mhm.
is great. Um,
Well,
I
I think
think that
crowdfunding has changed things
oh
tremendously
yeah,
because I mean, here's because what people don't often realize is how expensive it is to make these things if you're paying people, right? If you're going to pay people a decent amount that they can live on, it's expensive to make these. And most of them don't make that much money. And so the
right.
risk level of investing in something like this is so high that you couldn't get a loan to do it, or you shouldn't probably would have been a bad idea, right? And the reality is that, I love that these sort of crazy dreams people can sort of embark upon now and try some of this stuff that might have been left just in someone's basement as a, hack together idea they had that we never would have seen.
Yeah, yeah. I think you're right. I think the one of the exciting things that I think is in the future that people have been sort of, grasping around the edges of, but the killer app still has not shown up, which is intelligent game pieces. A tabletop gaming experience where the pieces on the table are all interconnected electronically, but it doesn't look like it. It doesn't look like a computer game. It looks like you're in a circle around a table. This idea of a shared space where your eye lines are towards each other. I think that's all really crucial for the tabletop gaming experience. But there's another dimension to be discovered where the pieces are aware of what they are and where they're at, and there's code for them to be able to interact in different ways.
Mm-hmm.
I think somebody's going to. I think the next Magic the Gathering, if you will, is going to be somebody designing a killer app along those lines.
Yeah, something that is expandable, that allows people to sort of grow it in a way that you can't today, and is affordable, right? I think that's one of the big problems too, is it's sort of like, for a long time, tablets and phones, they were so expensive that they just basically priced everyone out of using them except for early adopters. But yeah, if someone can come across with that combines like the Skylanders with the board game with the virtual tabletop and mix all of that together, it would be pretty fantastic.
Yeah,
See all of that come together.
Yeah, I think it's good. I thought it would have happened by now, because I've actually been preaching this. I've been forecasting this for quite, really almost, I think about 20 years I have, because I remember while I was at Hasbro being in a meeting with some of they had a department of people who are always just thinking about the future, right? And being in a meeting with these guys and coming out of that meeting thinking this, right? That's going to be the next big thing. And it's going to happen, in the next 5 or 10 years. And here we are 20 years later, and it hasn't happened really. Although, like I said, we keep seeing people trying it, right?
Right.
XCOM was kind of an example, like somebody having a computer program that's telling you when to do things, right? Or imagine like what if your phone was a game piece and it just sits on the table and it can do things. Of course, then when you get message, you'd have to pick it up and screw up the whole game,
Well, and you're starting to see that with some of these app enabled games, right? Like the new Hero Quest game that came out from Hasbro has an app that plays the GM, the dungeon master of sorts that you have in that.
Right.
So that, like, when I play with my kids, now we can all play, right? We're all heroes, and we just let the phone do the talking and walk us through it. My daughter also plays the werewolf one night using the phone app, so that no one has to run the werewolf game. And so when she and her friends play, the phone plays that role. And I think that that's stepping in that direction, starting to take those baby steps to where we need to end up. But all the pieces haven't quite come together yet.
Right. Exactly right. Yeah. So it's still exciting time to be a gamer. There's still always cool stuff going on and fun stuff.
So what have you been gaming? What gaming have you been doing lately that's really like caught you? That's whether it's computer or board games or whatever.
Sure. I don't play hardly any computer games. Not sure. I think I don't know why, but I just don't. I do play Sid Meier's Civilization. That's like the one exception. That's kind of like, there's nobody around, nothing else to do. I'm gonna play. I'm gonna go nuke Gandhi or something. So that's my one computer game. I do in RPGs. I'm a big fan of Burning Wheel and D&D. Those are my two go-tos. But right now I'm streaming Star Trek on game night, which is fun because I'd never I don't know. I've been DMing forever, but almost all my DMing has been fantasy or narrative style, where it can be anything, right? Like Fiasco, which is an amazing game, but there's no mechanics really to it. And it's collaborative and stuff like that. So it's kind of a different category. But like to do a D&D style game in space, like a crunchy system where everybody's playing a character, the typical way to play. That was like I'd never really done that in a science fiction environment. So as soon as I said I would do it, all of a sudden my mind started exploding with like ideas like, oh my gosh, this is going to be a lot of fun, right? Because and it is. That's and then my wife and I, we play a lot of board games. My wife prefers board games over role playing games, and I'm happy to play a board game. So we love the big worker placement games,
Oh yeah.
Uwe Rosenberg style games, like Agricola and Caverna and those games that, take a whole night and have
Right.
hundreds of pieces on the table.
That's most of the main games I play lately. They seem to like I'm buying sorters and things to hold cards, and there's pieces everywhere, and it's like I have to have a space like set aside, and drives my wife crazy. She goes, "How many more weeks is this game going to run?" I'm like, We'll finish it at some point. It's just need to leave it out a little longer." With the Star Trek, are you playing the Modiphius
Yeah.
2D20 system Star
Yeah.
Trek? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's very cool. We're playing the Fallout 2D20 in our group right
Oh
now.
yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, and I know some of the folks there, and I mean, they've done some really cool stuff with those games. So,
It was like I kind of said yes to doing it, kind of like, yeah, sure, I'll run Star Trek, and then I got the game and like, holy, because I'd never played it or DM'd it or
yeah.
anything, and like, wow, this is a big system. There's a lot to this, right? Oh my god, I'm already getting a little nervous DMing on Twitch. Now I'm doing it, and they're sponsoring me, right? So they invited me to run this game. Yeah,
Right.
yeah. So I'm running it so I'm getting sponsored. It's Star Trek. I've never run it before, never played it before. And I got a little nervous. Yeah, I got to say. So I have one of our Table Takes hosts, Nor, his partner, Anita, turns out she's a big Star Trek RPG fanatic. She loves this game. Thinks, she just mentioned it in one of her exits or something on a stream. And so I hired her to be my coach. So,
awesome.
so like every week we have a phone call with her. And I go over what I'm thinking, and she gives me, sets me straight.
Yeah. See, what I want is I want a GM's assistant. I want someone who, while I'm sitting there, they'll be looking stuff up, rules and things, and it'll just appear in the chat next to me as I'm talking through with folks, right? Like, how awesome would that be? That's like my dream.
Yeah. I have been toying with asking her if she could just be, like on the stream with me, incognito, and we could like chat back and forth.
Your Cyrano de Bergerac sort of situation, where
Right.
she's whispering in your ear. That's
yeah,
awesome.
I mean, I'm comfortable with all the normal, all the DMing stuff, like plot and all that sort of stuff.
Right, right.
That's natural at this point. But like, oh, how do what happens if somebody attacks the ship? Like what is this? How does the, just all it's a big system. There's a lot to keep track of it. I think I'm finally getting my head around it. I'm actually writing my own version of the rules because the rule book is like 400 pages.
Yeah.
And then she gave me this cheat sheet that's like 4 pages. And I need something kind of in between. I need like the 20-page, version of the rules. So I'm just writing it for myself.
Yeah. So before we're getting short on time, like we always do, we run out of time talking about things. There's one other thing I wanted to, speaking of rules and worlds and creating things, I just wanted to touch on this.
Yes. Chaldea.
Tell us about Chaldea. Yes, exactly. Yeah. I mean, it's very cool. Just tell folks about what it is and what you're doing with it.
Sure. Well, it's my D&D campaign.
Yeah.
When I started playing D&D, in 1978, I mean, within a year, I diverged onto the track of like creating my own world. And so like a lot of the iconic modules of the 70s and 80s, and early D&D, I never played in because I was just working on Chaldea. So I have Chaldea is my fantasy world that I've been building since then. And it's because it came from that time, it looks a lot like a D&D campaign. It's elves and dwarves and undead and, the typical things. When I decided to go public with it in a way, it was like, well, how do I do this? How do I present this? And I didn't, that kind of ended up feeding into what I was talking about earlier about wanting to find this cross between role-playing games and film. And so I started creating a story. And I've always looked at Chaldea as more like, okay, we're trying to create stories in Chaldea as opposed to a campaign setting. It's less about the world and more about the stories. And mythology is a big part of it. The Norse gods, the Greek gods, and the Egyptian gods, and Nigerian gods, and all all that sort of stuff. So there's a lot of mythic stuff in it. That's at the center of the plot lines for it. And so all of my Actoroki events, which I described earlier, are set in this world of Chaldea. So the idea is to kind of, if I can build up enough awareness of Chaldea and there people seems to be interested in it, then probably eventually license it to an RPG company to do the typical thing of making a setting book and some adventures and stuff like that. But I'm not personally really wanting to get back into the publishing business. I'd be
Right.
happy if I never again in my life held a piece of inventory.
It's not where you want to go, but you'd be happy to let someone else take up that
Yeah,
torch. And
yeah,
yeah,
yeah. Somebody, yeah. Then maybe that day will come. Right now, it's just a fantasy world that we're making stories in, and if you follow enough of our stories, our Actoroki stories, or our stories that we put in comic book art and mixture of comic and live action film art in our on our YouTube channel, you'll start to get a sense of what the world is through the stories. But I
yeah,
think that if people fall in love with worlds, I think they have to fall in most cases they fall in love with the story first. You
yeah,
like
yeah,
you like Game of Thrones before you like Westeros, right? You
yeah,
like
yeah.
Lord of the Rings before you like Middle Earth, etc.
That's a really good point. Yeah. Well, the link is on the screen and warning some adult content. So this is for the grown-ups to go
Yeah.
visit. So but yeah, it's very cool stuff that you're doing with that. And I really like the idea that you're leveraging this setting in a bunch of different ways. And I think that that's a very cool approach to the creative process is not just sort of targeting, I'm doing this as a game book, but more that, like you said, the storytelling element of it was very cool.
Yeah. Yeah, and I just started associating my public image, if you will, with it in the sense of like when I run games, when I run fantasy games, D&D games at conventions, which I often do, I just always set in the world of Chaldea. So it just becomes a way like like with me, you get this,
Yeah.
right? And this is a
Yeah.
part of me. And if I do that long enough, consistently enough, maybe it'll be interesting to be more commercial about it sometime down the road.
Yeah. Very cool. Well, we are just about out of time, which means it's time for the part of our show where we talk about somebody who is either just getting started or needs more of a spotlight or someone where it's like, really, you're not reading this person. And you have somebody to talk about tonight for us.
Yeah, I mean, she is getting some spotlight because she just won the Emerging Designer of the Year for Diana Jones. She goes by Momatos and Momatos, and she is a Southeastern Asian designer, and I think she created the hashtag RPG SEA, which is SEA stands for Southeast Asia. And so there's just like there's this, it's cool. I mean, there's this part of the world where there's just all this innovation and fun stuff happening with RPGs, and she's kind of at the nexus of it. And I think I mean, I'm a big fan of diversity, even though I'm an old white guy. I love seeing people come of all genders and ethnic backgrounds and orientations into our community. I just love that. And so to see the RPG scene in Southeast Asia on fire, it's like,
Yeah.
yeah, that's cool. Awesome.
That's
Go.
fantastic. Well, and I
Go.
think, I mean, isn't that kind of the nature of what makes the type of games we play so special is that it's not just me sitting in my basement writing something. It's
Right.
me and 4 or 5 or 6 other people working together to
Yeah.
meld our thoughts and ideas. And the more different ideas we bring to the table, the cooler the output is, right? That we come out with. Well, that's very
Absolutely.
cool.
Absolutely. It's so true. It's so true. And I remember, at first it started with letting girls into the game, like when I
Right.
was in high school, I couldn't understand why guys wouldn't want girls to show up. I mean, we're in high school. We're guys. Of course we want
Mhm.
girls to show up and play D&D, right? And then you learn that it's just so much more fun when you get people from all sorts of different
Yeah.
perspectives playing in a fantasy world where you're creating characters. And oh man, it's just the way to do it.
It is. It's fantastic. Well, Momatos, that's somebody that people should check out. Very cool. Getting the Diana Jones Award, which is a award awarded by folks within the industry to other people within the industry. It's given out every year. Hers is the Emerging Designer Award, I believe. Is that right?
Yep. Yep, the Emerging Designer Program, and the traditional Diana Jones Award will be announced at Gen Con. So this is a second thing that we added to the Diana Jones. I guess 2 years ago, like during the middle of the pandemic,
And
probably.
if anyone spots a crystal pyramid with some Indiana Jones guys frozen inside it, let us know. The award's
Yeah,
been missing for a few years now. It's very sad.
yeah.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Peter. This has been fantastic. It was great to talk to you.
Oh, thank you, Mark, for having me on the show. This is great.
Absolutely.
That's
And
fun.
we will hopefully be seeing you soon at Gen Con because it's just around the corner, believe
It
it or
is.
not. So,
I highly recommend it.
all right. Well, thanks again. Take care.
Thank you.
Well, folks, that is it. You have spent your another hour listening to us talk about gaming and the business of gaming and creative stuff and the fun games we like to play. Thank you again for joining us. It's really great. Make sure to check out Momato's work. She does some incredibly cool stuff. And that wraps things up for this week. Next week, I believe we're going to be doing a encore presentation of my interview with Terry Brooks, which is, if you missed it before, now's your chance to check it out. It's very cool. We got to talk with Terry Brooks, and that was awesome. The week after that, July 12th, we'll be talking with the best-selling and extremely talented author of the Green Rider series, Kristen Britton. So she'll be joining us. That's it for tonight. Thank you, everyone, for watching, and we will see you soon.